Hi, Suveer. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
I want to start with how you started like seven, eight different companies and integrated all of them into this one whole big project, one whole massive company, if or organization, if you will. How did you come up with these different companies? How did it start?
Sure. Fun story. We started back in the summer of 2008, where my partner Pratik and I were still in college. We were in the second year of college. And as rebellious young teenagers who wanted something to do with their time, bored of doing internships every summer in college, we decided to start up. We decided to do the romantic bootstrap founder startup thing just at the age of 19. We had two options. We had the option of going to the beach over the summer, which is what most of our friends and buddies from college were doing, or with the option of being productive, and we chose the latter. I don't know why. And we decided to start our first agency with a seed capital of $1,000, which was basically the amount of money that we had saved up to go to the beach between a bunch of friends. And we didn't go to the beach. We started an agency which is called Foxy Moron, which is the first agency we started in 2008. Back in 2008, there wasn't really a concept of digital marketing in India. It was a very nascent industry. It kind of blossomed 4 or 5 years later, and I guess we got into this space very early, significantly before the industry had ripened, which means that we got a certain amount of first mover advantage for all the big guys who wanted to get into the space early. Initially, for the first couple of years, there was a lot of education with brands about why they need to be spending their money on digital. And then somewhere in some global headquarters in Paris or New York or London, there must have been a mandate that you got to put five or 10% of your money into digital. And brand managers in India shrugged their shoulders, saying, how do we do that? What do we do? Remember those guys who came, the young boys who came and spoke to us? Let's call them in. And we got the opportunity to actually bag some of our first real big clients as early as 2009. We worked with maybe five or six brands from the Cadbury group. And I think our big break was when we signed Maybelline from the L'Oreal group in 2009 as well. And then we kind of honed that relationship with the L'Oreal group for about 11 years till 2020, and amassed about 26 of their brands over a period of time. And our mantra from the beginning always was that we want to be an integrated digital marketing services shop. So we started by doing content, and then we moved to media and then technology. And as the data narrative became more relevant, we kind of naturally grew our business into a content media data tech integrated business. In the 2010s decade, we realized that a lot of agencies were kind of picking specialisms. You had the creative shops, you had the media shops, you had the tech shops that were doing great work. But I think one of the significant advantages that we always had was that we were an integrated shop. And as a result, we had the opportunity to pitch for agency on record mandates where we would become the exclusive agency for our partners. And thereby, that meant that we held a lot of accountability for the work that we did. And there was no other agency to blame for the performance of a campaign if it did go south at some point of time in the year. But having said that, over the course of the 2010 decade, we also realized that there were the various different centers of excellence that were emerging. In 2016, we noticed the first center of excellence emerging with creative technology. We were doing a lot of work, a lot of interesting work with what was VR back then, and that died a natural death, and that kind of moved into AR, and doing some great work with Spark and with filters and that kind of stuff. And we realized that because we were an integrated agency, very often we were kind of getting conflicted for certain pitches, because if I'm working with L'Oreal, then I can't necessarily work with one section of Unilever, and there was a lot of conflict, you know. And we were getting conflicted out of several large pitches. But then we realized that if we have centers of excellence, which we kind of spin off into new agencies that have identities of themselves, brands of themselves, leadership, that owns a verticularized P&L themselves, that agency could then deliver a specialized service to a brand who I was otherwise conflicted with. So we spun off creative technology, then we spun off content production, then we spun off influencer management, then we spun off marketing tech services, then we spun off Web3 and metaverse, then we spun off sports management, and then we spun off event management as well. And we created this bouquet of companies that was essentially working in a integrated format, in which Foxy Moron, which is the lead creative and performance marketing agency, would hone most integrated relationships with clients. And then it would tag the subject matter experts into mandates, who were then not limited to working only with Foxy Moron's clients, but also work with a variety of other agencies' clients as well. And then in 2020, we put an umbrella brand over this called Zoo Media, which then kind of became the holding company of sorts that sat over this plethora of 7 agencies. We also realized over the course of this journey that it's not possible for us to build every single agency from scratch, because there's only that far that bootstrapping can go. So we started investing in other agencies through acquisitions, through joint ventures, through partnerships that really helped build the plethora of services we were able to harbor under our belt, and thereby increase the wallet share and the relevance we had with our clients. So this March, we finished 16 years since we started up as a young independent bootstrapped agency. We still continue to be young independent, well, not so young anymore, but we still continue to be independent and bootstrapped in terms of our growth. The agency today stands at about 600 people across 3 locations in India, which is Bombay, Delhi, and Bangalore. And over the pandemic period, we also opened up offices in Dubai and in New York. And today we work with clients ranging from groups like Unilever, Procter& and Gamble, IKEA, Netflix, Amazon, Burger King, Hershey, Starbucks, Kellogg's, Castrol, L'Oreal, and the like. We do a lot of work with startups as well. We do a lot of work with government and with sports as well. And that's a little bit about our journey and our startup story.
I find that super relatable because we're of similar age and we started at similar times. And I kept always getting the inverse advice, right? Which was, Jeff, you're 22 years old. Like, don't go in there and be an AOR. Nobody's going to take you seriously as an AOR specialized. So
Mhm.
I would assume you were getting similar advice, right? To, focus on one thing. And what made you want to zig when everybody else zagged?
Well, to be honest, I completely understand where you're coming from, because I spent the last 3 years, ever from the moment that we could travel after our travel restrictions were lifted. I spent the better part of the last 2.5 years researching the agency ecosystem in the US. And I realized that the advice that you get in the US is that verticalize, specialize, people won't take you seriously if you're generic, if you're broad, because you're competing with guys who do billions of dollars of billings and,
Yeah.
have that kind of relevance and market share with their clients. We got into digital specifically in India at a time when the industry didn't exist. The big boys themselves had
Yeah.
absolutely no idea what they were doing. And in fact, post 2012, when they couldn't figure out how to solve for digital, because they were putting gray haired guys in a room trying to solve, digital problems. And these guys came with television and print backgrounds trying to apply these old archaic formula, on digital, which didn't really work. So they tried the if you can't build it, then just buy it model. And from the 20
Yeah.
odd agencies that were relevant back in 2012, between 2012 and 2016, 18 of them sold to the big holding companies, to WPP, to Publicis, to Omnicom, to IPG, etc. And there are two of us that held out and yet haven't sold and don't plan to, and plan to kind of enjoy the independent position that we hold over the last 15 years.
Love it. The other
So
question I was going to have is, it's hard to interrupt, how was I going to frame this? What I was interested in is how many times in the course of this agency from 2008, 2009 to now, and I'm going to guess this number is decently large. How many times have you thought of or had to or are consistently thinking of having to pivot in this space?
Well, I think between Pratik and I, we actually hate the word pivot, right? Pivot is it's a word that's kind of been bastardized by the product tech companies and the startups that kind of
Right.
have blossomed over the course of the last decade. We're a marketing services company. We talk about evolution and we talk about growth. The reason why we don't use the word pivot is because pivot means you stop doing one thing and you start doing something that's tangential or something that may be even complementary to your line of business. And the way we look at it is an evolutionary form of business, because the scope of digital has expanded so drastically. When we started, we would do CRM, we do some basic search and build, brochure
Yeah.
websites for our clients. And then the social boom hit in the early 2010s, and then the integrated search boom hit, and then the performance marketing boom hit, and then the marketing tech boom hit. So we've kind of had to grow our service offering in order to be relevant and to continue our first mover advantage position with our clients, but not so
Hmm.
much pivot, I would say. I feel like a big moment in pivot came when Web3 happened, and there was a gold rush to blockchain and to
Hmm.
NFTs and to metaverse and stuff like that. And predictably, and of course, we were one of the first few agencies to kind of ride the bandwagon. I think we've done probably the most metaverse campaigns of any agency in India at the moment. But we all know how that kind of took shape. Now there's a big pivot around the corner when agencies are kind of stuck with this existential question as to whether their philosophy is going to be defined by people or machines with the advent of AI as well. And I feel like these are
Yeah.
big inflection points from a pivot standpoint, but we don't necessarily look at it as pivot. We look at it as growth and evolution. But I feel like these two in the last maybe 4 years have only been the two existentially, philosophical questioning ones with Web3 and with AI, because they could change the fabric of who you are. And as marketing services companies, we pay so much heed to the culture and the people that we work with that we don't plan to replace those people with machines anytime soon. Obviously, their work is complemented by, but we don't plan to, replace them. As far as pivoting is concerned, though, we had one big milestone in our journey, though. When the big guys came and started shopping with their big checkbooks, naturally they came after us as well. And we came close to partnering with one large multinational holding company headquartered in the UK. And at that point of time, our business would have required a pivot, which we didn't really like, to be honest. So we took a step
Yeah.
back and we said, hey, look, we've understood what this partnership means for us. Maybe it's in our best interest to stay independent and just enjoy doing what we actually genuinely enjoy doing.
Love it.
And that's so important, right? Like understanding whether or not you want to own the business or actually sell the business and earn the money. Because a lot of companies, when they start out, and once they've, and especially tech companies or like niche companies, when they start out, they build a business and then people acquire it, and they have no control over it anymore.
Absolutely, yeah. But I guess it depends on why you really start up, right? Like when we
Yeah,
started, we were, I guess, 19 years old when we started, and it was purely out of passion, right? There was no commercial interest in running a business at the age of 19. And back in 2008, the startup dream in India wasn't as fancy as it is now. India didn't have a Shark Tank back in
yeah,
2008. We've just run 3 seasons of it where doing a startup is romantic now. Back in the day, it was probably a foolish and risky thing to do, and the only
yeah.
people who did it because they were genuinely passionate about doing it, excuse me. And I guess if your motivation is clear from day one as to why you're doing it, it helps staying true to your course. And obviously that motivation evolves over a period of time. The reason we do what we do has changed and grown, has evolved, has not pivoted but has grown and evolved.
Yeah.
But we stay true to course, at least.
And how did you identify that, okay, this is the industry you want to get into between you and Prateek? In the sense that you started when you were 19 years old, how did you identify that, oh, marketing or digital marketing is something that we should explore because in the future, there are possibilities here?
To be honest, it wasn't digital. We said marketing because, like I said, digital didn't exist as an industry. When we started out, we did everything from print to outdoor to events to merchandising. It was everything under marketing services. I think the reason why both Pratik and I leaned towards marketing services was because of the few, I would say, maybe university projects that we did, because of the few internships that we did. We realized that it was a core strength that came very naturally to the both of us. I guess both of us met at Model UN, and Model UN requires you to have exceptional command over the language, communication skills, and that's where we bonded. To be honest, and we realized that communication was a strength for the both of us, and an equal strength for the both of us, and an equal interest for the both of us. So I guess the common interest with communication kind of dovetailed into marketing services. And then somewhere in 2008 or 2009, very boldly decided to take the punt, saying that we need to focus on one thing inside of comms, inside of integrated comms. And we decided to take that bet on digital because we were at the cusp where we weren't we didn't have the baggage of television and print because we didn't grow up in that generation, and we also didn't grow up with cell phones in our hands. So I feel like we were the cusp generation that could kind of take advantage and understand both sides of the pond. So we said, let's dive right in. We have no baggage, and we could be a digital first agency sometime in 2009, and that was the bet that finally paid off for us.
What has been the most crucial element for you in terms of tapping opportunities or tapping change and identifying change? Like, what has been the most important resource?
I think to a certain extent, when it comes to change management, I'll talk about both. I'll talk about it internally and externally. One thing that we noticed in 2009 when we started was that when we were pitching digital solutions to brands, and and some pretty popular brands, to say the least, these guys, these brand managers on the other side of the pond hadn't necessarily heard of what we were talking about. And we realized that we were maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead of the curve. A lot of our exposure came from looking west. It came from looking at agencies and campaigns and award shows in the West in terms of what they're doing and how we can derive inspiration from there, because the industry didn't exist. It didn't exist in the shape and form that it exists today. So when we'd go
Yeah.
and pitch, campaigns to our advertisers, we made it a point that a lot of the advertisers that we were pitching to were also global in nature. So it was very easy for me to go back to L'Oreal and say, look at what your office in Paris has done, or look at what your office in New York has done. We've got some references of what works in that market. Would you be open to the idea of experimenting? And they'd say yes. And then we'd experiment and we'd do something, like we do a small campaign, and they'd blow it up. And then they'd teach us what their other markets were doing as well. So I think our clients were a very big resource, and like pitching to multinationals was a great strategy, even though it was a very hard pitch with procurement and with contracting and stuff like that. It was a great strategy because we had so much learning in terms of not only their subject matter, but also their ways of working. Like I keep saying that Unilever is the hardest client in the world to work with. If you can hack their SOPs and systems and processes, and if you can negotiate a contract with them, then you can work with absolutely anyone under the sun. And that's what gives you the confidence to then swing yourself around the industry and swing yourself around the market, saying, I will take a shot at absolutely everybody. So I feel like putting ourselves in difficult positions as far as challenging clients are concerned very early on, it kind of put pressure on us to be able to A, deliver what we promise, and B, continue to be 2 steps ahead of the curve, which is why we were the first agency to execute a metaverse, a campaign for one of our advertisers, which is what we were one of the first agencies to maybe execute a GPT-4 campaign as early as November 2022, which is why probably we were one of the first independent agencies to win a Shorty award back in 2013 as well, from India. So I guess our clients and us put the pressure to be 2 steps ahead of the curve, and that worked well for us.
That's amazing. Speaking of one of the first agencies to do this and that, I want to pivot, even though we hate the word here, right? As you,
I invoked it. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's conversational.
I want to talk about the World Cup campaign. So, in 2023, India was hosting the ODI Men's Cricket World Cup, and your company was able to get the mandate for that. Talk to us about the process? What was the pitching process like, and what all did it entail? I'm aware that. You did the trophy in space, and 1 day is what it takes. So talk to us about the process, because this is all very exciting as an Indian, talking about like cricket and marketing, the both of them together.
Yeah, absolutely, Vanshika. What I'll do is I'll set some context also for our listeners who are not necessarily abreast with cricket as well, because that might help.
Yes.
And also to state on record, one of our agencies called TCM Platform, which is our sports management agency, is the one that won the mandate. We partnered with them in 2021 and added them to the portfolio of companies that work inside the Zoo Media network. For our non-cricket listeners, non-cricket fans who are listeners, cricket obviously is the largest sport in India. I think no one needs introduction to that. Cricket has a viewing population of, I think, over 1.6 billion people around the world. I think it is the third or fourth largest sport that is consumed. And a large part of that is because of India, obviously. Cricket is also popularizing itself in the West quite significantly. In fact, the 20 overs Cricket World Cup is going to be held in the US this year, if I'm not mistaken. The US has its own 20 overs cricket league as well, called Major League Cricket, if I'm not mistaken, which starts on the 4th of July this year. And I think it's popularizing itself in different parts of the world as well. The biggest event in the cricket calendar is the 50 overs men's cricket World Cup that happens every 4 years. And in 2023, India won the rights to host the World Cup in India. We haven't hosted the World Cup since 2011 in India, and that was the year that India won the World Cup, last after winning it in 1983. So there's been a significant gap between when we last won it and then in 2011. And I think our bid went through, and India, won the bid to host the World Cup in 2023. So naturally, they needed a marketing services partner that was from India, that understands the fabric of the country, understands cricket, so on and so forth. Our background is that we do a lot of work for cricket with TCM Platform. We do the biggest cricketing league in India is called the IPL, or the Indian Premier League. And for the last, I think, decade or so, we've done work across working with a variety of different teams, as well as with the board that actually runs the league. The board is called the Board of Cricket Control in India, or the BCCI. And in fact, we've even conceptualized a league for them, which is presently going on right now, called the Women's Premier League. which actually inaugurated in 2023, and it was the first time that a women's league for cricket was inaugurated at the size and scale as it was in India. The second season is going on presently. So that's a little bit of background and context about cricket and our interaction with cricket. Last year, the ICC, which is the International Cricket Council, floated a global tender to invite agencies to participate for three mandates: as their integrated creative agency, as their digital agency, and as their media agency. There were 23 agencies that participated in this RFI, and the ICC wanted to kind of select one or two or three partners to integrate this mandate. Now, a requirement for the ICC to partner with them obviously is knowledge of the game of cricket and local support in countries that the ICC has operating and strategic importance. The ICC's headquarters are in Dubai, and when we partnered with TCM, we set up a small office in Dubai so that it could locally liaise with the ICC and its various different stakeholders. Naturally speaking, the ICC was leaning very heavily on the BCCI because of its understanding of India and the Indian market in order to select a partner. And we have a great relationship with the BCCI, but obviously that held no value until we were actually selected. We went through a grueling selection process in which we pitched for all three mandates: creative, digital, and media. And after maybe 2 months of creative pitching, commercial negotiations, contract negotiations, team structure, cost, we won two out of three of those mandates. We won the creative mandate and we won the digital mandate. And the media mandate then went to Group M, which of course is one of the largest media agencies in the world and must have had a significantly more competitive bid than us on the media side. What that meant is that we got awarded the mandate to create the creative campaign, which was It Takes One Day, as you said. We created the official film that television and digital carried. We created the official anthem in which we made music for the World Cup. We made the music video for the World Cup. We liaised with all those Bollywood stars that featured in them. We did the opening ceremony for the World Cup, which had a bunch of, entertainment, pretty much like, it's a borrowed concept and learned concept from the West as well, with Super Bowl entertainment at halftime, so on and so forth. The closing ceremony with the prize distribution, a lot of the in-stadia branding, a lot of the entertainment around the 2 months that the World Cup kind of journeyed across the various different cities in India that hosted it. And then eventually also ran the Always On digital campaign where It Takes One Day came to life through a variety of different interesting content and media pieces that overtook the internet through social and engagement and customer activation through a variety of different digital channels. Interestingly, we kicked all this off through a PR campaign in which the BCCI announced that India had actually won the mandate to host the World Cup. And what we did is we sent the World Cup trophy to space. And then it paralanded by setting the geo coordinates inside the stadium that would host the semi-finals of the finals of the World Cup, the biggest stadium in India, which is in a city called Ahmedabad in a state called Gujarat. It's a relatively new stadium. It's just 2 years old. And it's got a capacity of about 110,000 people, if I'm not mistaken. And once the trophy hit the stratosphere, it was pre-programmed to have the geographic coordinates to paraland with a parachute right in the center of this trophy, of the stadium. And the press was all waiting there. And they had a press conference with the trophy landing there, announcing that India has won the mandate to host the World Cup. Naturally, our production guys rigged the parachute with a bunch of GoPros and managed to capture the entire flight and made a really sweet film, actually, which I'm happy to share with you guys about the World Cup trophy's journey into space and then landing into India. And naturally, there was a hullabaloo about it, at the press conference, and people were fascinated. And then this film went live, and then the PR around that story broke. So that was definitely something path-breaking that we did that got a lot of attention and a lot of eyeballs, and a lot of earned media and a lot of PR around just the launch of that campaign in India, well ahead of the film breaking and broadcasters carrying messaging about this as well. So it was a really fun campaign. We were really excited by the fact that the ICC was very bold in not only selecting us but approving our ideas as well. That did carry a certain element of risk but also a lot of novelty, because this is not something that sport has seen before. Fingers crossed all went well, and then it did, and then the rest is history.
As somebody who has done a lot of things that require only one take and you only get one take, just tell me like the level of how nervous the team was when you have something descending from space and you have one shot to get it to land.
Or I think the team was less nervous. I think the BCCI and the ICC was significantly more nervous.
Yeah. Okay.
Because when you do large scale production or large scale shoots, you're in the habit of over engineering everything, right? So even
Yeah.
if one camera does fall off, do you have three backups? Even if one battery dies, do you have six backups? Even if one connection for streaming fails, do you have three backups? You're in the habit of over engineering everything by creating contingency plans and backups. And Vanshika, going back to what we were talking about earlier, this is also something that we've learned from our clients, right? Clients that work in energy, power, oil, and gas, they have like
Yeah.
contingency plans and business continuity for everything under the sun. What happens if somebody trips over a wire and falls? Maybe you need a backup plan for that as well. So I guess this is a part of life that we learned while working with complex categories of advertisers, and there was a lot of over engineering that went into this. But having said that, I mean, the elements are never in your control, right? It could blow up
Yeah.
when it goes to space. It could not land at all. It could land in a different location, and you could have all of those chief guests standing there looking up at the sky, and then nothing happens. I mean, there's so many variables that are out of your control. So I guess like nerves were at a all-time high, but like I
Yeah.
said, fingers crossed, everything worked out. And yeah, we had like very, very few glitches in this altogether. And I guess it came from the fact that the ICC approved this idea well in advance, so gave us a lot of time to prepare.
Yeah.
If we had to bootstrap this, there's no way we would be confident to pull it off. We wouldn't even have suggested it, to be honest. But you're right,
Yeah.
everyone was on edge for 2 months, maybe.
I no, I can completely understand that. The PR person in me is then thinking about all of the contingencies I'd have in place. Where, like, if it lands in someone's backyard, I'm like, well, see, the World Cup is coming to your backyard. I would have had some kind of way of explaining almost everything, except if it blew up. Then I'd be like, I don't. It blew up. That's not good. But everything else, I think could have been explained. But that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, the insurance companies would have had a field day if it blew up, but that's a conversation for another day.
Because it
That's
was the real
that's
trophy.
It was supposed to be the real trophy.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, 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 yeah. You can't potentially blow up the real trophy and put it in space. I was gonna say, I was like, no, no.
No, you
It's
can't.
Yeah.
like for hockey fans, for me and being Canada adjacent, the idea of the Stanley Cup somehow going into space, that there is a dedicated person. I don't know how this works in cricket, but there's a dedicated person who follows that trophy. So if that was
Yeah.
sent into space, he would also have to be sent into space because he
Oh,
can't leave it
really?
unattended.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
No, also, I think the real trophy had some weight restrictions as well. It was very heavy, and then the rocket launcher couldn't support the weight. And anyway, it was too exclusive to let go of. But the real trophy did do a trophy tour in India for all the cities
Nice.
that were hosting the World Cup. It did see all the stadiums, and that was part of the press tour as well. So that actually happened.
Is it very funny, like when you come up with ideas and then in the execution you're like, okay, well we need to have experts in physics. We have to have experts in space.
Absolutely. But that's why I love our jobs, right? Because with advertising and with marketing services, you get exposed to absolutely everything under the sun. And even if it's just for 6 months, you have to you have to be a PhD in physics and space for those
Yeah.
6 months. It's great. It's superb fun.
That's what I was wondering about, whether this trophy that was sent into the space was like made of different materials, just
Mhm.
because, space would require different
Of
materials
course.
than
Yeah,
than the actual trophy.
of
I
course.
do wonder, since you work behind this, and if it's like public information, then please share it. How much does it cost to have this sort of marketing campaign executed at a global level?
Well, I won't give you exact numbers, but I can give
Yes.
you generic ballparks of how this is kind of structured. So, like I said, there were three large elements to the campaign. There was a creative element which comprised of a lot of strategy, brand work, the films, etc. There was and digital, etc. There was an offline element as well, which included making films that broadcast carried music videos, creating the anthem, etc., so on and so forth. And then there was the money that was actually spent on media, which Group M did. Um, so the interesting thing around the World Cup is that in a country like India, the ICC doesn't necessarily need to spend a lot of money because they're going to get a billion people that are going to be tuning in to watch cricket, anyway.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
question really was, how do they activate the World Cup in countries outside of India? And
Right.
very often, what ends up happening is they may have non-English speaking countries for which the communication may not necessarily travel seamlessly. In fact, a lot of the communication that we built in India was also not in English first as well. There was a lot of communication in Hindi because that is the most widely spoken language in India. So they divide their budget into three parts. And there was also the launch, which was the PR, but that was a one-time thing. Um, uh, the creative work is essentially top heavy, in which they're able to throw a couple of $1 million to make, a couple of films, and then those films run on broadcast for weeks on end until the World Cup actually launches, and then there's an anthem as well. For the creative work, they paid us a retainer that carried for. I mean, the World Cup is not a very long, campaign or season, so as to
Yeah.
speak. It's just about 2 months, So it
Yeah.
doesn't require. It's a very top-heavy project where there's a lot of work that you need to do that goes into building hype for it. But once you get the initial, viewership and traction, and you get to the knockout stages, you know that there's going to be continuity of users watching. The events and activations was a very expensive piece because, as you see with halftime entertainment for professional sports in the US, the production around those events is just massive, And
Yeah.
notwithstanding that, because you've got broadcasters from all around the world, you've got the biggest stars coming and performing as well. So the stars get paid a very hefty fee, which is a large chunk of the production. And then the production by itself had various different elements of it, both in stadia and outside as well. So, for example, in stadia, it pretty much follows the the halftime show with the lights and the sound and the music and the fireworks and so on and so forth. And those are expensive productions to put together. And then we did a lot of interesting stuff outside of the stadium as well. So, for example, in Bombay, we have this old monument called the Gateway of India, which is an old historic site on the on the banks of the sea, and it literally was a gateway to India for merchants that were shipping in. And we did some pretty cool projection mapping where we had like objects of different captains of different teams from around the world created in these 3D renders that were projected and mapped onto these structures, and we had sound and lights shows around different prominent parts of the city and the country to kind of bring the World Cup to life literally in your backyard. So it's on your screen on your mobile phone, it's on your television screen when you zoom when you tune in, but also when you just drive to and fro from work, you're seeing it everywhere, and you're not seeing it on billboards. It's not age old marketing. You're seeing it on like projected on large scale buildings. You're seeing your favorite captain. You're seeing flags of countries participating in matches today. You're looking at statistics and results coming to life projected on big buildings and stuff like that. So the ICC was actually very forthcoming when it came to us pitching a lot of innovations like that. And honestly speaking, if there's any country that should lead the narrative on innovation in cricket, it should be India. Fortunately, they had a relatively easy check to cut as far as like the paid media is concerned, because, like I said, you don't necessarily need to popularize cricket as a sport in India. That was a relatively
Right.
easy budget. But fundamentally speaking, that's how they kind of chose to distribute their budget. In this case, Star Sports, which is a offshoot of Fox in India, was the television broadcaster, and they've been a long-term partner and broadcaster of all kind of cricketing boards in India, even for the IPL, so on and so forth, both on television and on digital. And they were carrying the film, they were running the broadcast, and therefore they were also carrying. They had paid a significant amount of money to kind of bid to host. The broadcast on their platform, and therefore the relationship with them was tight enough to get great deals and great rates, and great barter opportunities even for paid media campaigns that eventually ran on their platform. So while we won't get into specifics of numbers, that's how they kind of strategically approached the budgeting exercise between the three partners that they had on board.
You spoke about translating campaigns. So I want to ask, was the campaign that India created, was it the same campaign that was also playing in other countries, or do they create different campaigns? Similarly, like for example, in 2015 World Cup, since India was not the country that was hosting, someone else created the campaign. So did we also receive the similar campaign, or was it translated for India purposes?
So usually a campaign is a script. If your country doesn't host the sporting event of that year, then usually a campaign is scripted by the broadcaster who has the rights to market that event in the year. What was unique about the World Cup for the first time in the history of the World Cup this year is that the maximum amount of coverage that anything gets is when a camera points at it and you've got a billion people looking at it, right? Which is why even when sponsorship is sold inside the stadium, the sponsor logos on the green have the maximum amount of visibility. The sponsor logos on my shirt
Hmm.
have the maximum amount of visibility. In cricket, we
Right.
have one unique piece of inventory called boundary boards. Essentially, when you hit a four or you hit a six and the ball rolls to the boundary, your camera is panning on the boundary board at least once or twice every over. An over comprises of six balls for our non-cricketing fans. Your camera is panning at least once or twice, on the boundary board every over. Now, the boundary boards usually also have large sponsors that have bought this inventory. But for the first time in the history of the Cricket World Cup, the boundary boards actually carried our campaign slogan saying "It takes one day," which means that the ICC actually endorsed it as its global campaign, and all countries that chose to actually inherited this campaign. So, which means that all the key arts that we created, all the key visuals that we created, were uploaded into the ICC's master server, and then it distributed those across the world to whoever chose to kind of inherit those and work off of them. And it only made sense for local companies, in local countries, to inherit these creatives and work off of them, because that's exactly what the messaging on television was, because that's what the cameras were filming. That's what was in Stadia. You would see "It takes one day" banners every single, in every single match, and you couldn't avoid that campaign no matter which angle you looked at it from.
Yeah, that
Right.
makes a lot of sense because, like, if you're talking like with FIFA and World Cup, they will have something that's universal, or even Champions League. They will
That's
have
right.
things that are universal, but yes, the local or regional broadcaster might have a different spin on it, or
Yeah.
different graphics. But essentially, they're using. I mean, obviously, they're all using the same sounder for World Cup or Champions League.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, even in the past, we've worked presently as well. We still work for Star Sports as an independent client of ours. We are the broadcasters agency as well. We've been the broadcasters agency in our current avatar and our previous avatar for over 6 years put together. We've been the sponsors agency as well, both for the FIFA World Cup and for the Cricket World Cup in 2011 and 2015, and back in 2000, whichever the 20 overs World Cup before that was, for both Pepsi and for Castrol, that have been long-term partners of the ICC and FIFA respectively. And when you work for the broadcaster or for the sponsor, you're aligning your communication objectives with
Hmm.
their brand objectives, not necessarily with the ICC's objectives or with the country's objectives, which is "I want to win the World Cup." But when the ICC gives you the mandate and says, "Hey, look, this is how you got to run it and adapt your creative around this," you're actually really happy, because it saves a lot of the constructive thinking that you need to do, because your objectives are aligned with them from day one itself.
How long before the World Cup started was the planning process for?
I think the planning process started. The World Cup broke in November of 2023, and I think the planning process for us started in March of 2023.
That's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, that's and you did all of that, like the sending the trophy in space and all the stadium ads and all the digital campaigns, all of that was within a span of 7, 8 months.
that's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
for the people who don't do this on a regular basis, that 7 8 months sounds like a long time. That is not a long time for something that
yeah.
large.
Yeah, especially when you've got so many moving parts and you've got two
Yeah.
clients. You've got the BCCI and the ICC, one sitting in India, one sitting in Dubai, like two offices coordinating. It was quite a bit. We sent the trophy to space in June, actually. So we had to finish conceptualizing and preparing for everything in June. And then after June, we just had to make the films, etc., in July and August. So essentially, the bulk of the work was done between March and June.
Yeah.
that's
Once you don't blow up the trophy, I feel like it's smooth from there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Then you've won their trust and you've won everyone's attention.
Yes.
and how long before that was the pitching process?
The pitching process actually went on for 2 entire months before that. And like I said, because there were 23 agencies, we went through a variety of different,
Mm.
multiple rounds of, feedback and shortlisting and multiple rounds of negotiation, so on and so forth. So it was quite an
Yeah.
arduous process. And because the ICC is a global organization, it was a global tender. So they weren't necessarily focused on awarding the mandate to an Indian agency. There were agencies from all around the world that we were pitching against. And a lot, came from large media houses, large advertising networks as well.
This one is an obvious one to pitch for, right? Like when you have something this big, you'll do 2 months worth of pitching. Do you
Absolutely.
have a philosophy on when it's worth pitching something or when it's worth kind of backing away?
I think this is a constant question that every agency head asks themselves. We used and I think it kind of goes through phases. When you're young and you're aggressive, you're like, we'll take any business that comes our way. And
Of
then you go
course.
through this massive growth spurt, and you said the growth has to be sustainable. I cannot take a business that's not profitable to me. And then you diversify, and you've got 7 agencies, and you're like, hey, now I'll take anything because something is going to fit into some agency or the other.
Hmm.
And so you go through this constant, ebb and flow, so as to speak, when it comes to shortlisting business. But I guess, like I said, if you are clear in your vision of what you want to do for your business, then it becomes easy for you to filter whether you want to work with a brand or not. For example, in 2016, when we had the first burst of the startup bubble in India, there were a lot of agencies like ourselves that lost a lot of money because startups were not getting funded anymore. And they had
Hmm.
millions of dollars of outstanding with their media agencies for customer acquisition and performance marketing campaigns, money of which never came back into the industry. And agencies like defaulted on millions of dollars of invoices with Meta, which was Facebook back then, and Google and YouTube and stuff like that, and we weren't able to pay. And then a lot of agencies put their hands up after that, those 2 years, saying, we shall not work with startups anymore. We don't care whether you're funded Series A, Series B, Series C. We're not going to work with startups anymore. And then a lot of those startups went on to become unicorns. And as you guys know, India has 83 unicorns that had come out of it right up until 2023, and several more that will come out this year as well. And I guess you missed the bus on those kind of clients as well. A lot of agencies say that we won't work with government because it's a very high risk business. The cans and the cannots are very high. They're looking at everything under a microscope as well. Like the US does, India has a very big election around the corner later this year as well. And the opportunity to work with government is flush this year for those who want to take it. I guess from our end, the one thing that we really hold very true to ourselves is our values. Whenever we're at a point of conflict in our life, we always go back to our values. Our values are, plastered all over, right from the day you join on the induction to, any day that you reach a point of conflict. We call our values ICE Cube, or ICEEE: integrity, creationism, excellence, empathy, and endurance. If we ever reach a stage where we have to make a difficult decision that we're not able to make just through logic and rationale, we go back to our values. If a client is being unethical, we do not work with them. If a client has a reputation of treating teams badly or speaking disrespectfully, we do not work with them. In our value pyramid, we are very clear that we put the organization and its employees well, their interest and their welfare and their safety well above any commercial interest or opportunity that a client could pay you. So if clients do not behave well or do not speak well to team members just because they're executives and they're young, it's a very clear red flag for us, and we choose to discontinue our association with them. But I think those occasions are few and far, and they're not instances that you have to deal with every day or even every year. I can think of maybe just 2 instances in the last 16 years of my career that we've had to deal with such instances. But I think it's really warm for us to know inside the agency that everyone thinks the same way now, because this has become the culture of who we are, and everyone's got everyone else's back, and we'll always hold the safety and security of our team first over the temptation of any commercial opportunity.
You talked about having offices in India and also in Dubai and New York. Are there different activities in each offices, different roles for each offices? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're headquartered in Bombay. We started in Bombay because Pratik and I are from Bombay. Bombay is also the media and entertainment capital of India, so it kind of became the default location to start our first agency, Foxy Moran. We started our second branch in 2012 in Delhi. We actually started this branch because we lost a client. We were Bacardi's agency, and we would manage their rum and their whiskey and their tequila and stuff like that. And we lost that business in 2013 or end of 2012. And they said, they picked up the phone and they say, hey guys, we're a big enough client for you to offer us a domestic office. And we didn't have a domestic office in Delhi. So they said, we know that you can't get an office up and running tomorrow. We want to work with someone who has local presence. And that was a big wake up moment for us, because we did have clients all around the country. But when an account becomes of a particular size, it does require hand holding. So in
Hmm.
2012 or 13, we set up our first office in Delhi and in Gurgaon, actually. And in that point of time, Gurgaon was still an up and coming market. Today, I feel like corporate India has kind of headquartered itself in Gurgaon significantly more than in Bombay. And I think the size of the business in Gurgaon has now equaled that of Bombay. We opened up Bangalore in 2015. for two reasons. One is because we had an anchor client in Bangalore as well, which is a brewery called SAB Miller, which now got bought over by Anheuser-Busch, which is Budweiser, Corona, etc. Um, so SAB Miller was Miller, Foster's, etc. That brewery, that group, that was a multi-million-dollar client for us. Who eventually said, "Hey guys, you need us. We need domestic presence." And in 2015, we set up an office to support them. And then we also won the mandate for IKEA and Amazon subsequently that required hand holding. So the investment in the office kind of played out. And as you guys know, Bangalore is also the tech capital of India. So that period from 2015 over the last 10 years has also seen the growth of a lot of large scale startups that have come out of Bangalore as well. And that office became strategically important for us to kind of be relevant with the tech industry in India. Whether it's the large scale old companies like the IBMs or the Infosys of the world, or it's the new tech companies, they're all kind of headquartered in Bangalore, and that became relevant for us. We're in the process of putting a fourth office in India together in Hyderabad, and I'll come to that in just a second. The office in Dubai was set up predominantly because of our interest in cricket. Like I said, the ICC is headquartered in Dubai, and that became an inevitability for us. And simultaneously, we also have a lot of other interests with cricket in the region, in the Gulf, with Qatar and Oman and Bahrain and stuff like that, organizing their leagues and working on sponsorships and stuff like that. And because we have the office now and we have a small team, we're now able to do some more work in Dubai as well because we have the office there. So we've started doing some work in the lifestyle space, in the commerce space, in the retail space. And post COVID, Dubai has really been booming, and that's been a fortunate bet that we've taken. We set up our New York office end of 2021 and formalized in January 2022. For us, that is presently a sales and servicing office in New York. In Chelsea, in Manhattan, it's a small team of about 6 or 7 people. We participate in a federated network called Dawn Marketing Partners, which is a consortium of about 15 best-in-class independent agencies, all in the US. Each agency represents one specialism. So there's one big media agency called Cross Media. There's one big digital transformation agency called D6. There's a creative agency called Barclay. Not sure whether any of these names are familiar to you guys. And essentially, we came in as the full-service digital agency. And what we're doing for the network and for other agencies and clients, so on and so forth, is we're setting up a offshore delivery center for other independent agencies in Hyderabad. So, like how the IT world has seen a lot of offshoring to India, the marketing services world is now beginning to pick up on the same trend as well. So, if you look at some of the largest holding companies, the two American being IPG and Omnicom, British being WPP, French being Publicis, etc. They've all set up significantly large back offices of tens of thousand people each in India to be able to offshore operational jobs to India under the marketing services domain. But unfortunately, independent agencies who are non-networked and not part of these large publicly listed holding companies don't have similar opportunities. So, as a organized player in India who can manage complex clients and who has demonstrated scale, we thought this is a great opportunity for us to kind of help partner with stateside agencies in the US that are independently owned and not backed by, are not part of publicly listed companies and holding companies, to help create a large scale offshore delivery center in Hyderabad, which is the fourth office I was telling you about, to assist with marketing ops, media ops, ad ops, tech ops, analytics, post production, essentially jobs that India has a high skill set with, jobs that are repeatable in nature, that do not require the cultural context of the country that we're delivering those services to, and definitely countries that will enjoy the cost arbitrage of offshoring to India or South Asia or different or this part of the world.
That's amazing. What is the future for marketing and for Zoom Media and all the other companies?
So very briefly, I told you that for us we have to be clear with the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing and stay true to that purpose, in order to really to keep enjoying what we do. And like I said, the purpose kind of grows and evolves. We could have in 2015 sold out when we got the offer to, and hopefully at the age of 35, I'm 35, I would have been retired by now. But that's not a fun life. With the second lease of life and motivation actually came from the fact that we made this observation that in 2015 when we got this offer to be bought out, it happened because of two reasons. It happened because the holding companies could not build, so they decided to buy. And the trend that we noticed was that any marketing services company, and I'm specifically saying marketing services and not technology because that's a different industry altogether, but any marketing services company from India that does well and that becomes big eventually sells out. We could not name one marketing services company, one advertising agency, or one media agency that's independent and that's gone global. And that does not exist as a format. However, I read a book very long ago called The Rise of the Creative Class that spoke about the origins of creativity. And, it spoke about the Indian origins of creativity that dated back to the Indus Valley civilization and to the Mughal courtrooms where poetry came alive, and, the Indus Valley civilization where pottery came alive and art came alive. And creativity is such an old form of expression in the subcontinent of India. We've always known to be highly creative people with, our art and our forms of craft. But unfortunately, our creativity is not necessarily celebrated at a global scale. Even if you look at the biggest commercial representation of creativity out of India today, it's Bollywood. And Bollywood is not celebrated at a global scale because it's not language agnostic, right? Because the world doesn't speak Hindi. But our work as marketing services providers can be language agnostic, which means that there is space for our generation of entrepreneurs, businessmen, and agency heads to globalize large scale global ad agencies whose heart and soul and culture comes from India. Today, our agency is about 600 strong, young, well educated, English speaking people that all have a global perspective. They're all globally curious. So, why can't our generation of agency heads now globalize the business and do this from the perspective of actually celebrating creative talent that comes from India, but on a global platform? And that's really been our vision and our driving force. I mean, no prizes for guessing that the next two decades are going to be India's decade, right? Our markets are booming. They've been continuously rallying for the last 10 years and will continuously, continue to rally. FII money is pouring into our stock. Foreign money is pouring into our stock market every year. Our stock market keeps outperforming quarter on quarter. Every company in India, whether it's large, small, or medium, keeps outperforming its quarterly results year on year. Our economy is one of the fastest growing economies of the world. So all eyes are on India for the next 20 years. And this is really our opportunity to shine and to do it for our country. And that's what's become our motivation today, to do it for our country, to to fly our flag high, and to really celebrate the authenticity of creativity that, has come from these shores and can now have the opportunity to travel the world and, and do us proud.
That's incredible. And whenever I speak to Jeff, I'm like, I want to bridge the gap between like Hollywood and India and Bollywood and the West, because I'm here, so I do feel like I can do it. So that's amazing. Jeff, do you want to take the keep it short questions?
Oh, I mean, I will do one. You can do two,
Okay.
and then I'll do three. So
Okay.
what we do at the end is something called keep it short. The questions are
Mhm.
short. Your answers can be however long you'd like them to be. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Question number one: the most audacious or ridiculous idea you had that did not get executed.
Oh, wow. Because if it was the one that got executed, we would have been in space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
that did not get executed. Is it okay if we circle back to that? I want to think about that because I want to give you a good one.
Yes, yes. When
Yeah,
she get question
cool.
two, then
Okay. I haven't thought about this. So give me a second also. Um,
I can do. Oh, you got it.
yeah.
All right.
Apart from the World Cup, because I'm assuming that might have been your favorite campaign
Yeah.
so far, but it might be my yeah. Okay. So what has been your second best, second favorite campaign, second favorite partnership?
In 2013, I think, or 2012, I don't remember which year it was actually the year that we won the Shorty. I think that's a favorite campaign for many people, that work in this agency. And it's actually been the reason why hundreds of people have actually joined us over the last 10 years or so. At that point of time, we were working with Garnier, which is part of the L'Oreal group, and we were doing a large scale activation for them. And we were doing a CSR campaign, a corporate social responsibility campaign. And we partnered with a non governmental organization called Project Chirag. Chirag translates to light, that was working on a rural electrification program. That essentially created a light bulb, if you may call it, that was solar powered and had the capacity to store energy through a small solar powered cell, and then it would light up homes through reflection, through refraction, actually, because there was water inside of it, and it would use natural light to refract a home, and it would also store some of the light to create power in the evening. And Garnier decided to piggyback on this opportunity and ride this bandwagon, and we did a campaign for them called Garnier's Power Light a Village. Coincidentally, this also tied up in context with a IPL team that we were working with, who Garnier was a sponsor for as well. The players of the IPL team decided to come on board as brand ambassadors for this campaign. And we did a lovely campaign that started with a film of a young boy who's trying in a village in India that gets no electricity. 72,000 villages in India actually don't get electricity around the clock. They get electricity for only a few hours a day, and this creates a lot of issues, as you can imagine, with security, with education, with safety of the girl child, with just basic day to day getting around. I could not do this podcast at 8:30 p.m. if I did not have electricity. Um, so we did this campaign with them, which started the film with this young boy running around trying to study, trying to help his sister study because his sister was the smart one, and she couldn't, and she would sit under a lamp that was made with the help of fireflies. Talking about, it was a really sweet
Yes.
film. It was a heart touching film.
I
Um,
remember this. As soon
you
as you
remember this?
mentioned fireflies, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
the fireflies. Yeah.
And then after this film went really viral, got millions of views, and then the cricketers came on board, and they did a bunch of like activations by riding cycles, and the cycles would generate electricity in malls, and that electricity would get stored, and then we take them to different villages to activate and inaugurate these lamps that we were installing in
Yeah.
people's houses. And then we packaged the whole thing through a lovely campaign which had a lot of social currency on it, made an app. Every time you interacted with the app by sharing messages, distributing content, etc., it started generating social currency that were watts. And every single time we crossed 55 watts, it would translate into Garnier sponsoring one lamp in one household. Eventually, like, lit up about 10,000 households over the period of that campaign, and it was a fabulous, like, very, very heartwarming campaign. Got to integrate the platform, which was Meta as Facebook as our partner at that point of time, the IPL team, the brand Garnier, NGO, and really get into the heartlands of India. So it was a very heartwarming campaign for us all.
I would say with sorry, Jeff, just one second. I would say in India, I feel like emotional marketing works so well. Like
Absolutely.
in comparison to anything, the ads that I remember the most are the Havels wires that don't catch fire. Fan with the actor, and like it's all those emotional ads, paperboard, like they have such all these great campaigns. And as soon as you said fireflies, I was able to like remember the campaign because I remember
Absolutely.
they like, yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Emotional marketing just works really well in India. That's what I want to point
No,
out.
you gave me the perfect segue because my question three, before we come back to question one, was going to be how do you tap into emotion? Because there are all kinds of different bells and whistles and different things that can go into a campaign, right? When we're talking about the absurd and the ridiculous or just the technicalities, but at the core, right, it's an emotion. You're selling a feeling. You're selling, a connection. So
Mhm.
when you pull back everything else, how do you tap into emotion?
I think it really boils down to understanding the customer, right? Knowing your customer, knowing your consumer. I think as far as advertising and marketing services is concerned, everything stops and starts and stops with knowing who your consumer is. Some of the most celebrated creatives that come out of India today, they pick up their skill of advertising and they're able to translate it into anything. They write films, they write lyrics for songs as well. And the reason why their film scripts or their character development in their shows or their lyrics of their songs resonate with people is because they understand the pulse of people and they understand the pulse of the nation. And in a country like India that has 1.4 billion people, that speaks 80 languages with over 300 dialects, it's impossible to know the length and breadth of the country. But even for what percentage of the country you do know, it does require you to get into the hinterlands of the country, into the roots of the country, to really understand what motivates people. In a country of 1.4 billion people, we have an internet penetration of only 50%. It's just 700 million people that are connected to the internet, whose consumer behavior I can read through studies, online, and access them through platforms like Google and Meta. There's 700 million people who still need to be researched or targeted through, offline or mainstream media, so as to speak. And the more time you spend learning these people, learning their behavior, learning your consumers, the more the higher the possibility of you being able to emote with them. And at the end of the day, there are clear passion points in India that are established. Religion is one, cricket is one, and these are relatively easy to kind of piggyback on, which is why we spoke about the Cricket World Cup for about 10 minutes or so. But when it comes to talking about humanity, humanity again becomes a blanket language that everybody understands. But the context of humanity is based in culture. Like in the north, south, east, and west of the country, the context for that humanity may be different on the basis of how people celebrate it. And I guess, going back to your previous question, saying why do you have offices around the country, is because the culture of, of not the north and the south and the east and the west of the country is different.
It's
So
different.
the
Yeah.
expectation from the brand is also different. Saying
Yeah.
that consumers are different, our way of working is different, and you need to get with that program. India is like 10 countries put together, honestly.
Yeah. That's why it's called a subcontinent, I feel.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then after that unbelievably eloquent and amazing answer about emoting and culture, then I have to just come back to, hey, what's the most ridiculous thing you've ever thought?
In 2013, I bought myself a drone and I tried to become a hobby drone pilot. And we had a
Yes.
lot of fun. And now we do like these large scale drone shows all around. We did a cool drone show for the Cricket World Cup, the Hockey World Cup, with like hundreds of drones, forming cricket symbols and logos in the air and stuff like that. But back when I was a hobby dronist, a buddy of mine, we used to use our drone to, to take it to all these cool locations for shoots in the mountains and the Himalayas, etc. And back then we were working with SAB Miller that I spoke to you about, the beer brand, the brewer, that used to do a lot of cool campaigns sponsoring music festivals. And I had a buddy of mine who used to do some cool stuff with IoT, with information technology tech for scanning, wearable devices, etc., so on and so forth. And we were doing activations in the VIP zone of this music festival that our beer brand was sponsoring. And we tried to do an activation where, when you walked in and you scanned your little band, a drone would deliver beer to you at your seat and at your table. Of course, the idea didn't go through. Of course, every single pilot we tried failed. We broke so many drones in the process. We lost a lot of money. We even cheated a film on my roof actually to show it to the client, but that idea bombed so badly.
It was fun. I mean, that's the thing. Like, one time we were shooting basketballs from a helicopter, and we didn't care to show the fact that it got on CNN because we showed all of the times we had missed. Because we were like, we wanted to be very honest with you. Like, when you do trick shot videos, you do not make it on the first try. So we're
Absolutely.
like, just here's this just pasture, this green field filled with basketballs. Yeah, I mean, you have to keep trying. You can't have to keep attempting. No, I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for
much,
this.
Suveer. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and for your time.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time chatting with you guys.
I as well. We as well. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna stop.